Hi, I'm Davis from Eazl. We are an online school that's trying to shake things up and make everything a little bit more affordable for people. If you don't know what Eazl is, you can check us out at eazl.co, eazl.co. And I'm here with Mariana.
Hi.
Mariana is one of the people on that does student support here at Eazl. She's cool. She was born in 1996.
Yeah.
Lives here in Chicago. And we're going to be talking today about the difference between millennial attitudes and Generation Z attitudes. Basically, there was a study that came out from Ernst and Young that made some pretty bold claims about the differences between millennials and Generation Z folks. And so Mariana is going to represent the young person's perspective.
Yeah.
And I know that you've done some research in advance of the interview.
Yeah, I studied up a little bit.
All right, cool. All right, so I'm going to let a few people come in. We're going to start in just about 1 minute. And so I'll just start this off with a little bit of a quote. So the first topic that we're going to be talking about is the difference between self-centered and self-aware. One of the big claims of this study is that Generation Z is self-aware while the millennials are self-centered. As a millennial, that's not the nicest thing to hear.
I agree.
But the study said that research consistently demonstrated that millennials were not willing to pay for products or services based on a company's environmental or sustainability practices alone. So what are you hearing there, Mariana?
I mean, I kind of agree. I think that Generation Z is a lot more self-aware just because we grew up as like a very diverse generation, probably the most diverse. I don't know. It's just like I don't know how to explain it. It's more just like I would agree with what the study said. I don't know. We rely a lot on other people's past experiences, if that makes sense.
Well, I know you have an older sister, right?
I do.
How much older is she than you?
She's 5 years old, 4 or 5.
So she's a pretty solid millennial.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get you in any family trouble or anything here, but do you notice anything different about her attitudes towards, consuming products or her attitudes towards brands than yours?
Maybe not so much as I would someone much older, because we're pretty kind of similar in age, I guess, and especially because she's my sister, I kind of look up and follow after.
Yeah, it's maybe a hard,
her.
yeah.
Yeah, but other people that I know, I guess, yeah, it's different just because I think my generation relies a lot more on consuming through social media kind of experiences. We rely on that, on reviews and YouTube. I think I look up a lot of reviews on YouTube. That's kind of how I go off of.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So, and if you have any questions for Mariana, we're going to be monitoring chat here. I see that Robert has a question. I will get to it in a second, Robert. And but you mentioned the YouTube reviews, which I just wanted to stay on for a second. And so, for example, when you go to will you look? So when you become aware of a product, is one of the first things you do go and look for reviews on YouTube?
Definitely. Especially just reviews in general. I look it up on the website itself. If it's not on there, I look it up on YouTube, just because it's nice to have someone else's personal experience versus just kind of buying it and it not working out for me. And then I had wasted my money on it. Stuff like that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, obviously I can't speak for all millennials, but I can say that I don't trust reviews that much.
I depend on.
Yeah, so that's a big difference. I think that I trust on my own, I don't know, sort of feeling about the company or research, non-review research, maybe more. But that's definitely interesting. And so I do know that that review videos are a huge category on YouTube.
Yeah, definitely.
And so is this for are you talking about tech products, services? I know that you're in school right now. Have you ever, for example, looked up anything related to reviews related to school or other things?
As far as school, I would say buying books, maybe. Whenever I buy books, I recently when I just started school, I went on Amazon and looked up the reviews on certain people who sell books. And if they don't have great reviews, I don't buy the books from them.
So the bookseller themselves.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
And
Got it.
then, but like as far as product, I would say I look up more like, um, like clothes. I definitely look at reviews just because, especially if I want to find something that's gonna fit me specifically, being 5'1" and like being very short, especially seeing on like social media has different type of models.
Oh, so you'll know, for example, this YouTuber
Yeah.
maybe has my size,
Yeah.
or she or he kind of looks
Yeah.
like they're about the same dimension, so they'll kind of try it on in it.
Exactly. And
Interesting.
especially because like as far as me, I look that up for people who are like the models in the pictures are super tall and it fits them like long. And then I receive my item and it's like past my knees.
That's
Kind of
interesting.
stuff like that.
So, just out of curiosity, for example, would you like to see, like on an e-commerce site, if it had clothes, would you, for example, like to see pictures of the garment on different models so you could kind of see?
Yeah.
That's really interesting. I
And
never thought about that.
and you don't really find that a lot, especially like in like popular websites. You Forever 21 stuff like that. You don't see it on different kind of models. You just see it on specifically like tall, thin models, and it just doesn't fit the perspective for a lot of buyers and stuff. I would say like that's why a lot of people, like even my generation, rely on online shopping a lot.
Yeah, I know
And that,
you. I know you like to. You like
oh
to buy.
yeah,
You like to shop online.
yeah, I do.
Do you shop like physically, really, like at all? Like, do you go to physical stores?
Rarely. I would say I online shop a lot more. The only downfall is, of course, that like now being able to try on the product or see it in person, um, see how well it is and stuff. But I definitely do shop online a lot more. I think it's just quicker. It's If you don't like it, you could just go return it and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then what about brands? Like, is it important to you that a brand is socially responsible? And if so, what kind of social responsibility are you most looking for?
Um, as far as what can you give it a kind of example?
Sure. I mean, I think there's social responsibility related to sustainability, the materials used. Obviously, fair trade is a big one. Local shopping is a big one. There are certain brands that take stances on political issues.
Okay.
So, like, do you pay attention to that stuff? Does that factor in your decision making?
Yeah, definitely. I would like agree definitely on brands that like represent other kind of to represent like something that is like an activist kind of thing. Like I like to put in money into something that I know is going into forward to a good cause.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. I also like doing like local shopping just to support local shops and
But maybe more with food and drink and stuff like that, since you're doing most of your shopping online.
yeah, but like buying things that are representing other things. Like there's certain ones that you can find that you buy a shirt, it represents like support for elephants being saved, stuff like that.
So you buy purchases that have kind of a give back mechanism to them.
Yeah, I would say there's a lot of things like little like tiny bracelets. You buy a bracelet, it supports like suicide prevention, mental health awareness, stuff like that, which I really like to take a part of and stuff.
Well, so yeah, I'm just going to read a quote from the study that said the key factor that differentiated these two groups, the millennials and Gen Z, other than their age, was an element of self-awareness versus self-centeredness, meaning the younger people, the Gen Z people like Mariana, placed a greater emphasis on their role in the world as a part of a larger ecosystem and their responsibility to help improve it.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Well, I know that Robert had a question that I want to get to before we move on more. And so Robert was asking about your attitudes towards leadership. How do you view? Let's talk first about just like business leadership. Managers, bosses. What do you think if you could give a message to people who are currently in management positions that you've interacted with, whether they've been your manager or people that are leaders of your school? What do you think they don't understand about you and about the experience of Generation Z?
What they don't understand?
Yeah, if you could tell them something.
I'd say that millennials are a lot more fond of working in groups, I guess. I think that my generation's a lot more independent, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it's just more like they like to be their own person and figure out who they are in society, and by that they become independent and they like to, be their own in the world, versus where millennials are a lot more like interconnected and they like to work in groups and stuff like that. And
So, for example, I notice one thing that a lot of brands do is they say like we're a community.
Mhm.
For example, like I know that Airbnb, which is a pretty well-known startup, they'll say, thanks for being part of the Airbnb community. And it is kind of a sham. It feels a little bit like a marketing ploy.
Mhm.
But for example, for me, I'm kind of like, okay, I get it. I'm like an Airbnb host or a user, so I guess I'm part of the community. But maybe that word community in that context, does that feel phony or unattractive to you in some way?
um, I guess not voting. It's just more like, um, I guess it's welcoming in a way, but at the same time, it's just like, okay, you know?
Yeah. Okay, so it's more about your work style, actually, when you're actually working,
Yeah.
that you would prefer to find ways where you can be autonomous but contribute to something bigger but not work in a group setting.
Yeah.
That's interesting. All right, so I'm going to get to another question that Brian has, which is Brian asks, how does Generation Z search for local businesses? For example, if you're looking for like an apartment or something.
Oh, even though I don't even look up for apartments, I love to like see whenever I walk around. Like, I have a dog, so I do a lot of walking around the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way I find the other things like that, like listings as far as that, or seeing advertisements, even in like local businesses. I work in a local business, so
So like posters that come
yeah,
in.
people post things on the wall, and you're able to look at all of those and see what's happening in your neighborhood and how to contribute to it and stuff like that. And that's
What
how I
about
like
these
it.
like weekly free papers? Like, we have the Chicago Reader here, New City. Do you read any of those papers? They're more cultural, like lighter, but I'm just wondering.
Is that like a newspaper?
Well, kind of. It's concerts and event listings. So, I mean, obviously, but I don't know if you read any of these little free print things that, that's typically where a lot of local businesses would advertise, but it sounds like you don't.
No, not really. If anything, I see stuff in the newspaper, but that's not.
Do you use any like local websites related to, for example, Chicago?
Mm, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that you can find online specifically. I mean, you can find anything online really, but like, um, you could easily find something just related to Chicago, like fun things to do in Chicago. And that's how I find a lot of things. Like,
So you'll just Google that, for
yeah, I
example?
use a lot of Yelp.
Yelp.
Yeah.
Interesting. So Yelp for not just for finding business and restaurant recommendations, but also for like events, because I know Yelp has like a forums element too.
Kind of, yeah. And then even, you know, certain like places will do shows at like coffee shops and stuff like that. And you don't know that.
Oh, you mean
just
like pop-ups and like vendors that
Yeah.
do little things like that? That's interesting. So basically, it's interesting. It sounds to me like you mostly become aware of local businesses more offline than you do online.
Yeah, just because I'm around the neighborhood a lot and you get to see it firsthand. You drive by somewhere, you see a sign, you um you just see it like on posters or um what do they call the boards?
Oh, like community boards or
Yeah, like
whatever.
community boards and bus stops. You see a lot of things on the bus stops.
Now, let me ask you about. I want to ask you about social media, and there's a couple questions I have. The first one is about social media advertising. Do you think that have you become aware of a company that you like, for example, from some ad on Instagram or Facebook or something like that?
Yeah, actually, just because I notice it a lot more now too. Is you could be talking about something on your phone with like you text, and then suddenly like an ad pops up for it on Instagram, and it's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've seen stuff like that, and especially because they're catering to what you are talking about with whoever it is you're talking about, and they find specific stuff like that for you. Like, you're talking about pizza, I don't know, or like Domino's ad will pop up, like
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. And
It's
I
kind of weird.
do, yeah, it's really weird, but I do use those things. Like, it'll pop up on Instagram specifically because that's a social media that I use a lot.
Instagram, you said?
Instagram.
Sorry. Yeah.
And I will it'll take you directly. It'll say like shop now, and takes you directly to the website, and there you are, just looking through stuff. And specifically, my phone apparently knows I like Forever 21 a lot. It'll pop up Forever 21 advertisements.
Okay, so Brian had a follow-up question for you about how you research companies. Aside from Yelp, what would be some other sites you would use to do research about a company or a product? YouTube, I think you said you'll see if there's a review there.
I use YouTube a lot. There's people who for me, as far as like hair products, like that's something that I've been looking at a lot. Like you find hair products and you find people who have similar hair. They'll do reviews on like YouTube, and then they'll tell you like, oh, it didn't work for my hair, like stuff like that.
Yeah, so mostly YouTube or the site where you're shopping.
And yeah, the site where you're shopping usually includes reviews.
Yeah.
And people can post pictures of the product, and that helps a lot too. Another one, I would probably just say Google. Like, if I've never used a website, I'll like Google it, and then people will tell you like, oh no, it's a scam, don't do it.
You mean like usually like an e-commerce site or something?
Yeah, kind of like a lot of websites that ship from like China, like a lot of them aren't as reliable as just well-known brands. So then people can tell you like, no, don't buy, because either it takes you forever to get it or it's not like well made.
What about like Facebook? First of all, do you use Facebook?
Rarely. I still use Facebook, but I don't feel that it's as relevant as it used to be in my generation, at least.
What about Facebook and Instagram for reviews? Do you see any of your connections or any of your network that like share ideas about these, products you're using or liking on those social websites?
Yeah, Instagram too. You can find people, even like well-known people on Instagram who have like a lot of followers. They'll give reviews on stuff they bought. Like, I don't use a lot of makeup, but you can find people easily on Instagram who give reviews on makeup and
link to the product and stuff like that. Well, I want to bring in something that the study said, which is that unlike millennials who witnessed the introduction and rise of social media, this is from the report, tablets and smartphones, the mobility that allows them to access it all in an instant, Gen Z was born into it. So I actually sometimes want to quit social media. Would you ever consider quitting social media, or do you think it's just too much of a fabric, a part of the deal?
I definitely do consider it, just because I think it's sometimes really overwhelming. And even they see it nowadays with my generation specifically, that we use a lot of social media. You see a lot of like depression and anxiety in my generation.
Like among some of your friends and people you know?
Yeah, and just in general, people who spend a lot of time on social media tend to feel those things, just because you're always on social media and you're looking at what people are doing with their lives and comparing yourself a lot. That's the only reason why I would say I would deter from it.
Do you ever fantasize about like some type of future that you feel like would be totally different than the one now, that like, especially one that is less involved with technology? Like moving someplace that's like around a lot of nature, or doing work that doesn't involve computers or anything like that?
Yeah, definitely. I would love kind of being more connected with nature in a way. I feel like my generation isn't really like that. We spend a lot of time on our phones and on the internet and stuff, that we'd rather be looking at people on vacation than actually go on vacation.
That's pretty weird.
Yeah, it is really weird. And when I've gone like to the mountains and stuff, and it's crazy, I didn't even have like service, and I was like, this is a pretty awesome experience, and I don't want to be missing it by being on my phone.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Totally. All right. So I'm going to ask you about this other thing. So this other part of the study said that 93% of parents say that their Generation Z children influence family spending and household purchases. Do you talk to your parents at all about what you guys buy for your house?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah. But I think that's just more as like my personal preference of like wanting to buy things for the house, or like what would look good. But that's because I live with them, if that makes sense. Like
But would you ever say like, Mom, that's not good for you. We shouldn't do that. Or, this is because this is, I think what the report is suggesting is that these Generation Z folks are more tuned into these social things. Do you think is that something that you ever think about?
Yeah, especially because I'm always looking up reviews. Like I'll tell my mom.
You know about all the reviews.
Mom, you can't go there. don't buy that product and stuff like that. I think she knows too, and she'll expect me to know that stuff because I see it online.
Yeah, it seems like almost a little bit of a reciprocal relationship where she says, maybe you do know some stuff that I don't know because you're hanging out online or you're more plugged in or whatever.
Yeah, even when it comes to buying clothes, she'll tell me like, oh, maybe I can buy it off this website. And I'm like, no, don't buy it off that website. Buy it off this website. Like it's better. Stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
As far as shopping, I would say that is my influence on my mom and my parents.
All right. Well, I don't want to also, I know you did some research. So is there anything that you wanted to share specifically that you thought, based on what you were reading before you came and got on camera with me, that you'd want to share with us? Anything that stuck out in your mind about the difference between Millennials and Generation Z?
Yeah, I saw that, which I don't necessarily agree with, but I also do agree with. It's giving you guys points is that we have a shorter like attention span than millennials, which is kind of true because I think we're always on social media and that affects it a lot more. But we do have a shorter attention span.
I have a question as a teacher. So, I think sometimes teachers think that things like sociology and economics are really important for understanding the world, history, biology. And what we're seeing in the higher education space is that more and more there are these programs that basically take you right into a job. So you're 18 and you go and you learn to be a coder or whatever in like a year, and then you become a coder and you're making pretty good money. And I know that sounds nice. So what are your attitudes towards those subjects like, I don't know, history and sociology and things like that? Do you think they're important? And do you plan to, how do you plan to integrate those subjects into your life if you do a degree that's more professionally focused?
Well, I think they're definitely important subjects. And a lot of times I think they're really underrated when you're actually like in school. You don't really learn about, society. I think it's specifically like you don't go to school and you don't learn how to live. They don't teach you that stuff. They teach you more like, I guess math's important, but like they teach you those kinds of things rather than like essential like life skills.
Do you feel like your teachers feel like they're under pressure right now to teach you really like relevant skills? Like this is what you can do in your career or whatever?
Yeah. And I guess it's not necessarily their fault. It's more like they have to teach you the other stuff. But I do think that history and sociology are all important subjects, especially in this time. It's like you look back and you relate to a lot of things that have happened in history, specifically like in politics. You look back on history and you learn from all of that. And you work through it through knowing what you have tried. It's like trial and error, Do
you learn about history on YouTube?
No. Right? No, I don't. It's more of just school.
Okay, from school. Yeah, and what about like reading history books or watching TED Talks or stuff like that? Do you do that kind of stuff?
Not really. More specifically, I learned a lot of it more from school or just from seeing things now like with activists and like people who do protests and all that. It brings up a lot of history, if that makes sense.
They'll be like, we're going to do this and we're not the only ones. There have been other people that did this and you get exposed to them that way.
And also it helps people like take action just from knowing that stuff. Just like it has happened in the past. Like this is how certain things that got done, or we have to continue fighting for things that are still not clearly fixed from past history.
Let me ask you about trust in government. So I know that you are a DACA recipient, and the government is not being very friendly to DACA recipients in general right now. And does this make you wish that the government was basically, does this cause you to want to change the government for the better more, or does it make you want to rely less on the government? Like, do you lose trust in the institution?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely do, specifically when it's affecting you directly. But I think it's kind of both things. Like, you want to better the government. You want to find people who are representing everybody, you know? And not just being like, I think we also are very like separated kind of country.
Like, people are kind of angry and divided.
Yeah, like we're very divided, and I would better it in that sense. But as far as saying like taking your own actions and protesting, peaceful protesting, stuff like that, I think that's still very relevant, and I think that does make a change. I mean, you've seen it in history.
Yeah, so you think, okay, so it seems like you're still hopeful that you can change the government. All right, so the last piece that I want to end up here, actually, wait, Brian asked another question, which is, all right, he asked if you ever use voice searching or you look for locations on maps. Like, do you ever open Google Maps and see like what's in an area?
Yeah. Specifically like through Yelp, that Yelp does that too.
Oh, you can see like what's in a neighborhood.
Yeah, you go on Yelp and you search in a certain map distance. You can search like coffee shops, and it'll tell you your most your closest, nearest coffee shops, and that's how I find a lot of things. But yeah, I use maps. I use it to get around too, like GPS.
What about voice searching? Do you have like these voice devices like Alexa and Google Home and things like that?
Oh, I mean, I've heard of them and I've seen them, but I've never had the one. No.
Would you be comfortable having a speaker in your house that listens to you all the time?
No, it's kind of scary for me.
Yeah, me too.
I'm already scared enough with the ads popping up on my phone. But like, I think certain things are kind of helpful, like Siri.
Oh yeah, so do you work with Siri on your mobile device?
Yeah, like especially when I'm on the road, you can click on your steering wheel and it'll ask Siri something, and I'll be like, Siri, play my music, and she'll play my music, and I don't have to touch anything. And that I do use a lot, just because I'm not texting and driving and all that. And I do appreciate Siri a lot for that.
All right, let me ask you about this final thing. So, okay, so this will be shocking to some millennials, but all right, so they asked Gen Z what the most recognizable celebrities were for them, and they were Smosh, PewDiePie. I think I got that right. Tell me if I'm wrong. Did I say that right?
I don't even know.
Okay. The Fine Brothers, KSI, and Ryan Higa. And I think these are all social media personalities. And then millennials named Mark Zuckerberg, Justin Bieber, Taylor Swift, and Lady Gaga. So I'm wondering, what do you think about like celebrities? And like, do you look up to celebrities, or do you think that they're kind of BS? Do you think social media is a more interesting area of sort of culture? What do you think about that?
I think that's really interesting. I do think that millennials are a lot more, they see it as like celebrities as people who are either, you know, making a change in the world, or people you see on TV, like in movies and stuff like that. For me, I would say celebrities are more like people who are well known for some type of reason. I mean, how can I say, like, I do look up to certain celebrities though. Like Mariana is one of my favorite celebrities. Just like her music, and she does a lot of stuff for herself. She's very self-made. She not only does music, she does her makeup, her underwear line, everything she does like for herself. That to me is an inspiration. Like, she does it, she's bringing herself up. But I do like see a lot of people like being dependent on people they see online as being their like idols and celebrities that they look up to, like the Kardashians, which I personally don't understand. But
what about celebrities for your brain? Do you have anybody that's like influences you to think this is what I think about the situation.
Yeah, I think you see that a lot in like comedy shows, I think.
Oh, like a Daily Show or
Yeah,
Stephen Colbert
I
or
do like
John
to
Oliver.
see the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon.
Oh, okay.
And he brings up a lot of controversial subjects and makes fun of it, but you kind of agree in it or you disagree with it. And I think that's a good way to go about it. It's not just full on argument. It's like, let's joke about it, but also talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
I like that a lot. Or yeah, I think through comedy, seeing it is one of my favorite ways.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you for being here with us. Thank you, Mariana. I appreciate it. I know Brian said thank you from the Threshold Carve Agency from Texas. He has asked me a few questions. We're live every Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So or Central time, 10 a.m. Central time. So join us next week. You can see the topic that's coming up. I'll share it on social media. And thanks for checking out Eazl, being a part of the Eazl community.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Mariana. Appreciate it. Bye.